This gate won't protect you forever. Open it now, or the HOA will fine you every single day until you comply.
Stand down. Open this gate immediately.
Stance.
Using HOA access and ignoring compliance orders will result in escalating fines and every remedy under the association's governing rules.
4 trespassers ignored a Marine's warning. 5 seconds later, 2 were in the dirt, 1 was running for his life, and the HOA's worst nightmare had officially begun. That's how people online tell it now, short, sharp, and dramatic. They say I stood on my porch at sunrise, gave a warning, and then dropped 2 so-called HOA enforcers before they could touch my front door. They say a black SUV with no plates rolled onto my land like it owned the place. They say the shotgun came out, the sheriff showed up, and from that moment on, Silver Creek Ranch HOA started unraveling from the inside. And technically, none of that is false. But the truth is, stories like this never begin with violence. They begin with quiet. That morning had started in the kind of silence you only get when you've worked hard enough to earn distance from the world. It was a Saturday, just after 7. The sun was still low, pouring gold across the pasture in slow, soft bands. Mist clung to the tops of the grass, and the air still carried that cool edge that disappears as soon as the day properly wakes up. I was out by the barn feeding my horses, doing exactly what I'd done 1,000 mornings before. Hay in one hand, pitchfork in the other, boots planted in dirt that belonged to nobody but me. My mare Daisy nudged my shoulder for more feed, even though she'd already had enough. I scratched her neck and listened to the ordinary sounds of a peaceful life. Hooves shifting, leather tack creaking, wind brushing through the fence line. That kind of peace doesn't happen by accident. It comes from choosing land far enough away from the noise. It comes from gravel roads, barbed wire fences, posted signs, and the simple luxury of being left alone. It comes from not having neighbors peeking over fences to complain about grass height or paint color or where a man parks his truck. It comes from not living under an HOA. That mattered. Because half a mile up the ridge sat Silver Creek Ranch, one of those polished, planned communities where every house looked like a variation of the same approved template. Beige walls, matching shutters, lawns cut to the exact same length. Mailboxes probably measured with rulers. It had started small years earlier, then expanded in stages as more people moved in wanting country views without country living. I'd never had anything to do with them. My land wasn't inside their development, wasn't under their rules, and never had been. I bought my 180 acres at a federal auction. Clear title, clear boundaries, end of story. Or at least that's what I thought. Then I heard tires on gravel. Now, when you live out where I do, vehicle sounds travel differently. You learn to read them. Some engines carry familiarity, some carry purpose, some carry trouble. And that morning, before I even saw the vehicle, my body already knew what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The sound was too heavy to be casual, too slow to be lost, too deliberate to be innocent. I stood still, pitchfork in hand, and listened. The vehicle wasn't stopping at the gate. It wasn't honking or turning around. It was coming in. I wiped my hands on my jeans and started walking toward the front of the property. Before I reached the bend in the drive, I saw it. A black SUV, glossy as wet ink, sliding past my posted "No Trespassing" sign without even tapping the brakes. No front plate, no rear plate. Windows so tinted they reflected the sunrise back at me like mirrors. I remember muttering to myself, well, that's not a good sign. I've dealt with trouble before, in training, overseas, back home. Trouble has a posture to it, a smell, a kind of rhythm. It moves like it already believes it has permission. That SUV had that exact rhythm. But there's something else you should know before this story goes any further. I'd prepared for a day like this long before it arrived. Because when you own land next to a growing development, especially one run by people who confuse paperwork with power, you learn fast that you don't wait until trouble starts to start protecting yourself. I had cameras at the gate, cameras facing the barn, cameras under the porch roof, motion alerts, cloud backups, 3 angles minimum on anything that mattered. Not because I was paranoid, because I was realistic. So when that black SUV rolled to a stop just inside my property line, something in me settled. Not fear, not anger, just readiness. The calm, measured kind that training leaves in your bones when the moment starts tilting sideways. The engine idled for a few seconds. Then the doors opened. Heavy boots hit my gravel first. 3 men stepped out, broad-shouldered and dressed in matching navy shirts with some embroidered logo over the chest. Not police, not contractors, not county. Just official-looking enough to fool someone who didn't know better. Then out came the 4th. A woman in her mid-40s, maybe older, with a blonde bob cut so stiff it barely moved in the wind. Tailored blazer, sunglasses. A tablet held against her chest like it was a badge of office. She looked at my ranch the way people look at open property listings, as though the fact that something exists means it's waiting for them. She spotted me and smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Good morning," she called. "You must be Mr. Drake." I didn't return the smile. "Depends who's asking." She started walking toward me, heels clicking on gravel like she was crossing a hotel lobby instead of a ranch road. "I'm Karen Seaford," she said, disciplinary coordinator for the Silver Creek Ranch Homeowners Association. I let the words hang there. "Ma'am," I said, "you may want to take another look at where you're standing." She kept smiling. "Of course, we're aware this is your parcel." "Then you're also aware," I said, "that this is private property." One of the men behind her snorted like he'd heard something amusing. Karen raised her tablet and tapped the screen. "Your parcel falls within Silver Creek's designated visual influence buffer zone." I stared at her. "My what?" "Our community is expanding," she said smoothly. "Future development plans require aesthetic consistency along all bordering properties, especially those visible from planned Phase 3 lots." And there it was, the real reason they'd come. Not a misunderstanding, not a neighborly check-in, not some innocent visit. Control. Karen kept talking, flipping through her notes like she was presenting to a boardroom. "We've received multiple concerns regarding unauthorized fencing, unregistered livestock structures, and visual inconsistencies that conflict with Silver Creek's long-term development vision." I looked toward my barn and then back at her. "You mean my horses, my fencing, my barn, on my land?" A tall man behind her laughed under his breath. Karen didn't. "Mr. Drake," she said, "we're here to conduct an exterior compliance inspection." "No," I said flatly, "you're not." For the first time, her expression tightened. "Excuse me? You don't have authority here." I pointed down the driveway toward the sign they'd ignored. "And that big red sign you drove past means none of you should even be standing on this dirt." One of the men stepped forward, a big, shaved-head brute built like a refrigerator with fists. "Sir," he said, "we're authorized to inspect perimeter structures on behalf of the HOA. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at him. "You folks lost?" I asked. "Or just pretending reality doesn't apply to you?" Karen lifted her tablet again like a shield. "We're offering 2 pathways for resolution. Option 1, voluntary integration into the Silver Creek Ranch HOA. This would allow you access to community waivers and voting rights." I laughed once. "Ma'am, I bought this property from the federal government. It has never been in your HOA. It will never be in your HOA." She cleared her throat. Option 2, refusal to cooperate, resulting in fines, citations, code enforcement referrals, and if necessary, demolition review for unsafe or non-compliant structures. That's when I understood it fully. This wasn't bluster, it was strategy. They weren't there to inspect anything. They were there to establish pressure, to make first contact, to see whether intimidation might work before they escalated. Behind Karen, the tall one lifted his phone and started filming my porch like he was collecting evidence. The third man drifted toward the barn and grabbed the chain on the gate. He rattled it hard enough to send a metallic crack through the yard. Inside the barn, Daisy threw her head and stamped. That was enough. I took one step forward. "You've got 5 seconds," I said quietly, "to turn around and walk back to that SUV." Karen's smile returned, thinner this time. "We're here in an official capacity, Mr. Drake." "No," I said. "You're trespassing." The big man puffed up. Karen gestured without even looking at him. "Proceed." That one word changed everything. The guy on my porch hopped up the steps and reached for my doorknob. The man at the barn yanked the chain again. The shaved head one moved closer like he meant to lay hands on me. And just like that, the calm morning was gone. People like to imagine that fights begin with rage. They don't. Real fights begin with decisions. The tall one on my porch made his when he put his hand on my door. I moved before he could turn the handle. I caught his wrist, twisted it outward, stepped into his balance, and drove my shoulder through the space he thought he controlled. His phone flew out of his hand and cracked against the porch boards. He shouted once, more surprise than pain, but by then I'd already pivoted. His legs came out from under him, and he slammed sideways into the rail before hitting the deck hard enough to knock the air out of him. The big one charged next. Wide swing, heavy body, more aggression than technique. That kind of man thinks size is a plan. I stepped right, redirected his arm, and let his momentum finish the sentence. He stumbled forward, trying to catch balance that was already gone. I hooked, turned, and drove him face first into the dirt. A cloud of dust rose around him. Before he could recover, I planted a knee between his shoulder blades. Not to break anything, just to remind him who had made the worst decision. He spat dirt and cursed. The third man froze at the barn gate, hands still half raised. He looked from his buddies on the ground to me, and whatever confidence he'd driven in with drained right out of him. Karen finally found her voice. "Stop, stop! You can't touch them!" I looked at her. "They tried to force entry into my home. You assaulted my staff. They're trespassers." The tall one on the porch rolled over, gasping. The big one pushed himself up, face filthy, pride worse off than his arm. The third man backed up once, then twice, then broke completely. He ran for the SUV so fast he nearly tripped over his own boots, dove into the driver's seat, slammed the door. Karen spun toward him, shrieking, "Do not leave! We are not finished here!" But she was wrong. They were finished. They just hadn't accepted it yet. The shaved head one stood again, left arm hanging wrong, fury on his face but doubt in his eyes. He looked at me like he wanted another try. I said nothing, just held his stare. Some men need to be beaten. Some only need to understand. He stopped. That's when Karen lost whatever control she thought she still had. "You are done," she snapped. "Do you understand me? You assaulted authorized personnel. You resisted inspection. You are going to jail." "Enough," I said. She actually flinched. "This is private land. You came here without permission. You ordered your men onto my porch, onto my structures, and toward my barn. That's trespassing." "We have documentation." "It's all on video." That hit her harder than anything else had. I pointed toward the cameras. Gate cam, porch cam, barn cam, every second. Her face lost color. And in that moment I knew something important. They hadn't come here to inspect. They'd come to provoke. They'd expected fear, confusion, submission, maybe anger they could twist into a police report. What they got instead was a man with training, restraint, and evidence. Karen's hand tightened around the tablet. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I walked to the cabinet beside the porch door and opened it. Inside sat my old 12-gauge pump shotgun, well-oiled and exactly where it belonged. I picked it up slowly. Not raised, not aimed, not waved around like some fool in a movie. Just held. Then I racked the action. That sound carries. The big man froze where he stood. The tall one on the porch stopped trying to rise. Even Karen's tablet dipped half an inch. "You can't threaten us," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm protecting what's mine." I held the shotgun low, barrel safely toward the ground, finger nowhere near the trigger. Deliberate, controlled, clear. "Now all of you get off my land." The big guy backed toward the SUV. The tall one staggered after him. Karen stayed put a second too long, torn between ego and survival. Ego lost. She backed away, step by step. "You'll regret this," she said again. But her voice had changed, no authority left in it, just fear dressed up as outrage. The SUV doors slammed, the tires tore gravel, and just like that, they were gone. For a while I stood there listening to the quiet return. Horses settled first, then the wind, then the normal sounds of ranch life, slipping back into place as if the world was trying to pretend nothing had happened. But I knew better. People like Karen don't retreat, they regroup. So I put the shotgun away, closed the cabinet, and called the sheriff. The dispatcher answered, and I gave my name. "This is Russell Drake. I've had 4 individuals trespass onto my property. There was attempted forced entry, threats, and 2 of them got hurt resisting removal. No life-threatening injuries." Her tone sharpened. "Deputies are on the way. Stay where you are." "I'll be here." 15 minutes later, 2 Lassen County Sheriff's cruisers rolled up the driveway. Deputy Bill Myers stepped out of the first one. Good man, steady eyes, knew the difference between noise and facts. "Morning, Russ," he said. "Bill." He took one glance at the dusty men near the SUV and the shaking woman with the tablet, and knew this was going to be one of those calls. Karen marched toward him before he even reached me. "Officer, arrest him. He assaulted my staff, interfered with an authorized inspection, and brandished a firearm." Bill didn't answer her immediately. He looked at me instead. "You got footage?" I pointed up. 3 angles. He nodded. "Let's see it." Karen shoved her tablet at him. "We are operating under HOA expansion rights and visual boundary jurisdiction." Bill looked at her then. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you got any permit, court order, or county authorization to be on his land?" She blinked. "We have internal planning documents." "That's not what I asked." No answer. I pulled the footage up on my phone and showed him everything. The SUV bypassing the sign, the men exiting, Karen giving instructions, the one at the barn gate, the one on my porch, the attempted entry, the scuffle. Bill watched the whole thing without interruption. Then he exhaled through his nose. "Well," he said, "that's pretty straightforward." Karen nearly choked. "It's edited." Bill didn't even dignify that with a full glance. "Ma'am, I've known Russ a long time. If he'd wanted those boys seriously hurt, they wouldn't be sitting up right now." That shut the whole yard down. The big guy looked away. The tall one stared at the dirt. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Bill handed the phone back. "From where I'm standing, your people trespassed, ignored warning signs, attempted forced entry, and escalated a confrontation on private property." "We are the HOA," Karen snapped. "Not on his property, you're not." That line hit her harder than the sheriff report ever would. The second deputy finished checking IDs. No warrants, no permits, no county order, nothing. Bill had medics look over the bruised men, took statements, and finally turned back to me. "Keep those cameras running," he said quietly. "Folks like this don't quit easy." "I know." He tipped his hat and left. Karen's SUV peeled out for the second time that morning. And for about a week after that, things went still. Not peaceful. Still. There's a difference. I did my chores, checked fencing, replaced a loose board on the backside of the barn. Life looked normal. But once trouble shows its face, the land feels different for a while. like a storm has brushed past and left static in the air. Then came the envelope. Certified mail. Thick paper. Law firm seal. Kemp and Doyle, attorneys for Silver Creek Ranch HOA. Inside were 4 pages of polished nonsense accusing me of aggravated assault, interference with lawful inspection, emotional damages, obstruction of compliance, and, my personal favorite, visual sabotage of community aesthetics. I laughed when I read that line. Couldn't help it. But the laughter died when I got to page 3. They'd printed a still frame from my own footage, one of their men on the ground, and labeled it evidence of my intentional public humiliation of HOA staff. That's when I called Julia Rich. Julia and I had served on the same base years earlier when she was still in JAG. Smart, relentless, the kind of lawyer who doesn't bluff because she doesn't need to. She answered on the second ring. "Russell Drake," she said, "what kind of trouble are you in?" "HOA trouble," she groaned. "That's the worst kind." I told her the whole thing. The SUV, the trespass, the sheriff, the lawsuit. When I finished, she said, "All right, send me everything. Not just enough to fight it, everything." By sunset, she had copies of my deed, federal auction records, county tax parcels, security footage, timestamps, still images, and every message they'd sent. The next morning, she called. "Your property has never been inside HOA jurisdiction," she said. "Not now, not before, not even close." "I know." "No, Russ," she said. "I mean, not even on the edge. For them to claim jurisdiction, they'd have to cross 2 surveyed boundaries and a federal easement." I sat up straighter. "So they're lying." "Yes, but it gets better." That tone in her voice told me something had shifted. I pulled their formation documents, archived parcel overlays, and the GIS files used during Silver Creek's expansion filings. And somebody altered one. I went still. Altered how? They took an approved map file, extended the visible boundary line to make it appear your parcel fell inside a so-called visual buffer zone, and re-uploaded it to their internal records. I stared out across the pasture while she spoke. "The county never approved that zone," she said. "Whoever did this assumed nobody would check metadata." "And you checked." "Of course I checked. Digital files leave fingerprints, software signatures, timestamps, modification trails. Whoever tampered with that map knew just enough to be dangerous and not enough to be smart." "Let me guess," I said. "Karen." "Almost certainly." That changed everything. Trespass was one thing, fraud was another. Julia moved fast. Injunctive relief, declaratory judgment, counterclaims, administrative fraud angles, harassment, malicious trespass, intent to intimidate. And then she said something I'd already started suspecting. "This isn't about aesthetics," she said. "It's money." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "They already promised expansion, didn't they?" "That's my guess. Your land is in the way of whatever story they sold." That same week, my gate camera caught another SUV creeping down the drive after dark before turning away. They were still watching. Only now, I wasn't waiting. Then things got stranger. Karen posted in the HOA community page accusing me of being unstable and dangerous. Claimed I'd assaulted peaceful inspectors. Claimed my property was an agricultural hazard zone. Only this time, the comments didn't support her. They flooded her post with links. One video. A cleaned-up edit of my gate and porch footage. No dramatic music, no spin. Just the truth from multiple angles. Their SUV passing the sign. Their men approaching my home. Their escalation. Their fall. I hadn't uploaded it, but it spread anyway. Veterans groups shared it. Ranchers shared it. Local reporters shared it. People everywhere recognized the same thing. Not an inspection, but intimidation. Then I got an anonymous email. 3 attachments. One was a memo written by Karen on HOA letterhead. The first line read, "We need to set a clear example. If this Russell gets away with rejecting our influence, others will follow." Further down, "Approach dominant, record confrontation, push for physical escalation." The second attachment was a screenshot from an HOA internal chat. Karen, "He needs to feel outnumbered. Unknown member. Clear to escalate if needed?" Karen, "Yes." I forwarded everything to Julia. She called me immediately. "This is the break," she said. "This isn't just overreach anymore. This is coordinated provocation." The next day, a pickup rolled onto my property around noon. I recognized the driver when he got out. Jeff Slade, the taller one I'd put down on the porch. He looked rough, shoulder-taped, bruises fading, pride stripped clean off him. He raised both hands. "Mr. Drake, I just want to talk." I didn't invite him closer. "What do you want?" "I'm done," he said. "With Karen, with all of it." He told me the video had reached him, then the leaked memo, then the realization that Karen had started blaming her own people, saying they'd acted without her orders. "She's throwing us under the bus," he said. I said nothing. He kept going. "She told us it was a routine compliance check. Then she said we needed to be firm. Then she told us to make you feel outnumbered. Said if you resisted, we should keep pressure on you and make it look like you were the aggressor." He pulled a flash drive from his jacket. Texts, payments, voice memos, everything I kept. I took it. He looked at me hard and said something I didn't expect. "You could have hurt us a lot worse that day. You didn't. Thank you." I studied him. Time teaches you that not every fool stays a fool forever. "Go home," I said. "Julia will contact you." He nodded, relieved. Then he added one more thing before leaving. "The leak? The memo? That wasn't me. But somebody on the HOA board is scared. Somebody higher up." The whole structure was cracking. And 3 days later, it broke open in court. The evidentiary hearing at Lassen County Courthouse drew more attention than anyone expected. Reporters, ranchers, curious locals, people tired of Silver Creek's nonsense. Karen arrived looking nothing like the woman from my driveway. No polished confidence left. Hair too tight, makeup uneven. Her lawyer looked like a man regretting every life choice that had brought him there. Judge Catherine Mueller presided. Julia wasted no time. She entered the memo, the chats, the altered GIS evidence, the footage. Then she called Jeff. Under oath, he confirmed everything. The orders, the intimidation, the instruction to escalate, the promise that Karen would handle the paperwork if things went sideways. Karen's lawyer objected until his objections started sounding like panic. Then Julia entered the original zoning maps, paper records, county authenticated. My land was not in HOA territory, not near it, not arguably, not accidentally. Judge Mueller went very still. "This court," she said, "finds sufficient cause to proceed with full evidentiary review regarding alleged fraud, misuse of authority, coordinated trespass, and malicious conduct." Translation? Karen had gone from aggressive HOA officer to potential defendant in something much bigger. 2 weeks later came the final hearing. By then the room was quieter, less spectacle, more gravity. Judge Mueller reviewed everything: filings, footage, maps, testimony, metadata, financial records, HOA communications. Then she ruled. Silver Creek Ranch HOA, under Karen Seaford's direction, had engaged in unlawful trespass, misrepresentation of jurisdictional authority, falsification of zoning materials, coordinated intimidation, and malicious intent. Their claims against me were dismissed with prejudice. I was awarded damages, $220,000, jointly against the HOA and Karen personally, and the matter was referred to the district attorney for review of possible criminal charges. Karen didn't fight when the ruling landed, didn't shout, didn't cry. She just sat there staring at the table, finally meeting a truth she couldn't bully, rewrite, or vote against. Outside, reporters rushed forward asking for comments. Julia handled them. I didn't. No point talking when the record already had. 3 days later, the county suspended Silver Creek Ranch HOA's operating authority pending full audit. 5 days after that, Karen's house entered foreclosure. A week later, Jeff emailed to say she'd left town quietly. No goodbye, no final threat, just gone. People always expect a man to celebrate after a win like that. I didn't, because it never felt like victory in the chest-thumping sense. It felt like closure, like a gate finally latching after weeks of standing open in a storm. About a month later, I stood by my front entrance with Joe, the metal worker from town, installing something new, 8 feet wide, 4 feet tall, steel-cut letters bolted into oak posts thicker than railroad ties. When we stepped back, the morning sun hit it clean. Armed, trained, private. This land is not for sale, not for HOA. At the bottom, in smaller lettering, was one final line. Not in your HOA. Joe laughed so hard he slapped my shoulder. Russ, he said, you're going to be a legend. I tipped my hat. Maybe, but at least I'm a legend on my own land. And with that, the gate swung shut. The wind moved through the grass, the horses grazed, and for the first time in a long while, the ranch felt like itself again. Quiet, steady, mine. Now, if you step back from the drama and look at what really happened here, there are a few lessons worth paying attention to. First, Russell never threw the first punch. That matters. A lot. He warned them, repeatedly, clearly, on camera. He responded only after trespass turned into attempted forced entry and intimidation. He didn't chase. He didn't grandstand. He didn't escalate recklessly. He used control, leverage, and timing. In legal terms, that distinction can mean everything. Second, the real turning point wasn't the shotgun. It was the cameras. People get emotional, memory gets messy, stories change, but footage doesn't care who's louder. 3 camera angles destroyed the classic he said, she said trap before it could even get started. If you own land, cameras are not decorations. They are witnesses that never forget. Third, paperwork beats bluster. The biggest mistake Karen made wasn't trespassing. It wasn't even trying to provoke a fight. It was believing nobody would dig into the records. HOAs and similar groups often rely on confusion, intimidation, and the assumption that ordinary people won't verify the fine print. But parcel maps, zoning records, GIS overlays, deed histories, and auction documents exist for a reason. When Julia pulled the originals and compared them to altered files, the whole house of cards collapsed. Fourth, metadata is a silent witness. People think deleting, renaming, or reformatting a document erases the truth. It doesn't. File histories leave traces, timestamps, software signatures, version data, modification trails. Karen may have changed the picture, but she couldn't erase the fingerprints. And finally, the most important lesson of all, you do not always win by shouting louder. Sometimes you win by knowing your boundaries, documenting everything, staying calm when the pressure hits, and letting the truth do the heaviest work. That's what this was really about. Not just one man standing up to an HOA, not just a confrontation on a ranch, but the difference between power and authority. Karen had power inside her little world. Meetings, fines, newsletters, social pressure, fake confidence, a board full of people too comfortable with being obeyed. But authority? Real authority? Legal authority? Moral authority? She never had that on my land. And when she crossed that fence line pretending she did, the story was already headed toward one ending. Because a man who knows exactly what he owns is a hard man to move. A man who documents everything is even harder. And a man with both discipline and patience? That's the HOA's worst nightmare.